You're watching Forsaken Joe. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy the story. Let's begin. I was sprawled out on the couch, remote in hand, mindlessly flipping through channels. The late afternoon sun cast a dim light through the curtains, but I wasn't really paying attention to anything. My head was full of work stress, bills, and a constant buzz of life that I couldn't turn off. I was just trying to zone out, hoping for a break. Then I heard it. Slam. A car door. I looked up instinctively, curious. It wasn't the normal sound of cars passing by. I peeked through the window. There she was. Caroline, my wife, stepping out of the car with someone I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a friend, someone I hadn't met before. But there was something about the way they moved together that caught my attention. It wasn't just that they were walking side by side, talking as though they shared some kind of inside joke. No, it was the way his hand brushed her lower back as they made their way toward the house. He was close, too close. It wasn't like Caroline at all. She always seemed so reserved with people, especially men. But this guy, this stranger, he stood a little too close, smiled a little too easily, as if he had every right to be there. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but from where I sat, it didn't matter. The way she was laughing, the way they fit together, I stared, heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I mean, I didn't even know this guy. Maybe they were just close friends. Maybe it was nothing. But something about the way she looked at him, something in her eyes, shifted everything. I stayed still, watching as they made their way inside. She didn't even glance back at the door, not like she usually did when she came home. It was as though I didn't even exist. My thoughts were spinning, my stomach tightening, but I forced myself to stay quiet. If she didn't want to explain this, I wasn't going to force it out of her. Not yet. I didn't want to make assumptions, not just based on what I'd seen. But I had a feeling deep down, one I didn't want to acknowledge. The car door slamming echoed in my mind again, a sharp reminder of how suddenly everything was shifting. She'd always been so careful, so controlled, but now she was so open with him. I couldn't ignore the truth that was creeping into my brain. It wasn't the first time I'd felt something like this. The late nights, the distant expressions, the way Caroline had started pulling away in the last few weeks. But I wasn't sure. I couldn't be. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. So I just sat there, letting the scene unfold in front of me. Just waiting. I sat there for what felt like hours, the weight of the silence pressing down on me. The man, the stranger, had finally left. The door had clicked shut behind him, and Caroline had walked into the house with that same fake smile she always wore when she was trying to pretend everything was fine. But nothing was fine. My mind was racing, replaying the images of her with him, too comfortable, too familiar. I could hear the laughter from outside, and it grated against my nerves. How long had this been going on? How long had I been oblivious to the slow unraveling of the trust between us? I tried to tell myself that maybe I was overreacting, that it was just a misunderstanding, but deep down, I knew. I knew the truth. I had seen the signs too many times over the past few weeks. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the coolness in her voice whenever I tried to reach out. It was as though I was speaking to a stranger, not the woman I had shared my life with. I couldn't sit still anymore. My body felt like it was on fire, the anger, confusion, and hurt crashing over me in waves. I had to do something, anything to stop this spiraling feeling in my chest. Caroline went upstairs to change, still unaware of the storm I was fighting to keep contained. As I paced through the house, my hands trembling, my mind raced through every interaction, every little moment I had dismissed. She had been distant, yes, but it wasn't just that. There were times when she would glance at her phone, quickly turning it face down when I walked into the room. Little things like that, things I had ignored, suddenly took on a new meaning. I couldn't stand it anymore. The silence felt suffocating. I knew it wasn't just suspicion now. It was the truth. Desperately, I walked to the drawer where Caroline kept her things, her phone. I hated myself for doing it, but the impulse was overwhelming. I had to know. I had to find the proof that would either tear me apart or put my doubts to rest. I grabbed it, my fingers clumsy as I unlocked it with her fingerprint, my heart thudding in my chest. The first thing I saw was the messages. There they were, plain as day. The text thread between Caroline and the stranger. The playful banter, the flirtations, the intimacy of their exchanges. The words she had used, "I can't wait to see you again. "I miss you so much," tore through me like a knife. It was undeniable. She had been seeing him. She had been with him for God knows how long. I sat down, the phone heavy in my hand, my mind struggling to comprehend what I had just uncovered. My hands shook uncontrollably as I read through more messages, each one confirming what I had feared. The world seemed to tilt beneath me. I could feel my trust, the foundation of everything I had built with Caroline, shattering with every word. My marriage, the life I thought I knew, was nothing but a lie. How could she do this? I couldn't even bring myself to process it fully. All I could think about was the emptiness that now filled the space where love and trust had once lived. Caroline returned home just as the evening was settling in. She came through the door, her usual calm, collected self, as if nothing had happened. She kicked off her shoes, her face lit up with a forced smile as she spotted me sitting at the kitchen table. Her voice was light, almost cheerful, as she greeted me. "Hey babe, how was your day?" she asked, dropping her purse onto the counter. I didn't respond immediately. I just stared at her. My hands were still shaking from what I had found, and every second I spent silent only made my pulse race faster. Caroline raised an eyebrow, clearly noticing the tension in the room. She stopped in her tracks, her smile faltering. "What's going on?" she asked, but I could tell she already knew. "I think you know exactly what's going on," I replied, my voice low, controlled but seething with anger. I didn't want to yell. I didn't want to lose it. Not yet. Not until I had all the answers. Her face remained neutral, but I saw the quick flicker of something behind her eyes. Guilt? Fear? I couldn't tell. "I don't know what you mean," she said carefully, trying to keep her voice steady. I took a breath, slowly rising to my feet. "I saw you today," I said, my voice tight. "With him." Her eyes widened for a brief moment, then she quickly masked it with a shrug. "What are you talking about?" she asked, still playing dumb. "I saw you with that guy," I repeated, my voice getting harder. "The one you've been seeing behind my back." Her expression didn't change, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a shift in her demeanor that I couldn't ignore. "It's not what you think," she started, but the words fell flat before they even reached my ears. "I know exactly what it is," I snapped. "Don't try to lie to me, Caroline. I know everything." I pulled her phone from my pocket, the evidence clear in my hands. "I found the messages. I saw what you've been saying to him, what you've been doing." She went silent, her gaze dropping to the floor for just a moment before looking back up at me. But there was no remorse, no apology in her eyes. She sighed, almost like she was disappointed in me for making this a scene. "You went through my phone?" she asked, her voice sharp now, defensive. "Really?" "I had to know the truth," I said, my voice steady, but inside I felt like I was falling apart. "How long has this been going on, Caroline?" She didn't hesitate. "Months," she admitted, her tone flat. "It's been going on for months." I stood there, frozen, my mind racing as her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Why?" I whispered, barely able to get the word out. "Why would you do this?" She met my eyes then, her expression softening for just a second before hardening again. "You weren't there for me," she said, her voice low, almost accusing. "You were always working, always so distant. I needed someone, and he made me feel alive again. He made me feel seen." I felt my breath catch in my throat, the pain and betrayal eating away at me from the inside. "So, this was my fault?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. "Because I worked too much." She didn't respond immediately, her eyes scanning the room, avoiding my gaze. "It wasn't just that," she said, her voice quieter now. "But yeah, it was part of it." I shook my head, struggling to process her words. "You had everything, Caroline," I said, my voice breaking. "We had everything, and now it's gone, just like that." She looked away, her face hardening again, as if she couldn't even meet my eyes. I was staring at a stranger. The woman I thought I knew had just disappeared, and in her silence, I knew she had already made her choice. I stood there, the words she had spoken echoing in my mind. "I've made my choice," Caroline said, her voice void of emotion. She stood in the kitchen, not a hint of regret in her eyes as she looked at me. It was as if the woman I had loved, the woman I had given my heart to for so many years, had been replaced by a stranger. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand how someone I had trusted, someone I had built my life around, could turn so cold. It was as though everything we had shared meant nothing to her. "Caroline, how can you say that?" My voice was barely a whisper, and yet it felt like I was shouting. "How can you just walk away from everything?" She looked at me then, her gaze indifferent. "I don't expect you to understand," she replied, her words sharp, almost like she was done justifying herself. "But I've made my decision. Either you accept it, or you leave." The finality in her voice made my chest tighten. For a moment, I thought I might choke on the words I was struggling to hold back. I didn't want to lose everything we had, but here she was, standing before me, emotionally distant, saying goodbye without even a hint of remorse. I wanted to leave, to walk away from this unbearable pain, but something inside me refused. I stood there, paralyzed by the weight of her indifference. I wanted to scream, to shout at her, to feel something, to show some sign of regret, but all I saw in her was cold detachment. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Every breath I took felt heavier than the last. She stared at me for a long moment, her arms crossed, waiting for me to make a move. But I couldn't. I couldn't move. I couldn't make a decision. Not when the very foundation of my life was crumbling beneath me. Finally, Caroline sighed, as if she were exhausted by the entire conversation. "I'm not going to keep arguing about this, okay? I've made my choice." She turned her back on me and walked toward the door. As she opened it, she paused for a brief moment, her fingers lingering on the doorknob. She didn't look back. "Goodbye, David," she said, her voice now faint, distant. The door clicked shut behind her with the same cold finality that had settled in the pit of my stomach. I was alone. And the silence that followed was deafening. It was as if I had lost everything I had ever known. I sank into the nearest chair, feeling like a stranger in my own life. How had it come to this? How had everything we built fallen apart so easily? The house, the marriage, the trust. Everything I had given, all of it seemed to mean nothing to her. I could feel my body aching, a heavy weight pressing down on me. The anger, the heartbreak, and the overwhelming sense of betrayal were too much to process all at once. Caroline had made her choice. And in that moment, I realized I didn't even know who I was anymore. I couldn't sit still. The house felt foreign now, like a place where the memories of a life that was no longer mine had been carefully stored and abandoned. The space was suffocating. Every corner seemed to whisper reminders of Caroline, our life, our shared moments, the home we built together. I kept replaying every single moment, every gesture, every word, as if I could somehow find the missing piece, the one thing I could have done differently. Maybe it was something I missed, something I failed to see or understand. I had been so sure of us, of her. How had I not noticed? The question swirled relentlessly. Was I too focused on work? Did I not show enough attention, not provide enough emotional support? Was I too wrapped up in the routine of our lives to see her slipping away? I hated the feeling of inadequacy that clawed at me, the gnawing sense that somehow I could have saved this. I could have fixed things. But the truth was, I hadn't even known there was something broken. My mind spiraled. The guilt was overwhelming. It twisted around my chest, made my head pound. I thought about the years we'd spent together, the years I'd believed in this marriage, in us. It felt like a dream, a perfect illusion. How had it crumbled so easily? I stared out the window, watching the sunlight fade as I tried to make sense of everything. But I couldn't. Nothing made sense anymore. The house that had once been full of laughter and warmth now felt like a prison. The silence was unbearable. It felt as though the walls were closing in, trapping me with my thoughts. I couldn't escape them, not in here, not with all the memories. The sudden urge to leave hit me like a wave. I couldn't stay here, surrounded by all the things that reminded me of her, of what had been. I had to get out. I had to do something to stop the thoughts from suffocating me. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door, my legs moving on autopilot. I didn't know where I was going, but the bar down the street seemed like a good enough option. I needed to drown my thoughts, if only for a few hours. The walk to the bar was long enough to give me time to process everything, but the more I thought, the angrier I became. I was angry at Caroline, angry at myself, angry at the entire situation. I felt like a fool. At the bar, I ordered a drink, anything to help calm the storm raging inside of me. The alcohol burned as it went down, but it didn't numb the pain. Nothing could. I stayed there for a while, mindlessly sipping my drink, surrounded by people laughing and talking, living their lives. They had no idea what was going on in my world. They didn't know how much I was breaking inside. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Maybe some form of relief, maybe just a distraction. But all I found was emptiness, and even in a crowded bar, I felt more alone than I ever had before. I didn't expect to feel anything after leaving the bar. I thought the alcohol would dull the pain, but all it did was make everything feel emptier. The night was cold, and as I trudged back to the house, the weight of everything settled on me again. The silence of the place was suffocating, and I couldn't shake the images of Caroline and him from my mind. I collapsed onto the couch, too tired to sleep, too angry to rest. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was a message from Caroline. "Can we talk?" "I'm sorry, David. I need to explain." My finger hovered over the screen. I had promised myself I wouldn't fall for this again. I wasn't ready to hear her apologies, wasn't ready to listen to more justifications for what she'd done. But the part of me that still wanted answers, that still hoped for some kind of reconciliation, couldn't help but respond. "Why now?" I typed, my thumbs slow and deliberate. "What do you want from me?" The response came quickly, almost too quickly. "I need you to hear me out. I'm sorry for everything. I've been a fool." I stared at the screen, my pulse racing. There was a flicker of hope, but it felt distant, hollow. Could I believe anything she said anymore? Could I ever trust her again? I put the phone down, my thoughts spinning. As if the universe had heard my inner turmoil, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Caroline. It was him. The message was brief, cryptic, and casual. "We need to talk too." My blood ran cold. My heart pounded harder. I didn't even think about it. My feet moved on their own. I grabbed my coat and walked out, the chill of the night air doing nothing to calm the fire in my chest. I made my way to the nearby park, expecting to see nothing. But there he was, standing in the shadows, as though waiting for me. He turned when he heard me approach, his face lighting up with that same arrogant smirk I'd seen earlier. "David," he said, his voice dripping with a kind of fake friendliness that made my skin crawl. "We need to clear the air, don't you think?" Without a word, I took a step closer, my hands clenched into fists, my body tense with rage. "Stay away from my wife," I said, barely managing to keep my voice steady. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Look, man, I didn't want it to go this far, but if you want to blame someone, blame her. She's the one who kept calling me." The words hit me like a slap. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I shot back, my fists now clenched tightly at my sides. "You know what she's doing to me. You know what she's doing to our marriage. Hey, she's the one who wanted this, not me." He shrugged, his arrogance unshaken. "I'm just here for what she needs." My mind was spinning. I wanted to lash out, to hurt him in the way I was being hurt. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about him. This was about Caroline. It was always about her. I pulled out my phone, seeing another message from her pop up on the screen. But I didn't respond. Instead, I deleted it. The finality of it hit me like a cold wave. There was nothing left for us to fix. No apology would ever undo the betrayal. Caroline's words, her regrets, meant nothing now. Without saying another word, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. Caroline's attempts to reach out came as no surprise. The first message arrived a day after the confrontation, but I ignored it. The second came 2 days later, and I did the same. Her third message seemed more desperate, pleading for a chance to talk, to explain herself, to somehow fix what had been shattered. Each message, a reminder of the life we once shared. But it didn't work anymore. I was tired of pretending that we could go back to what we had, tired of holding on to a woman who was already lost to someone else. I stared at her name on my phone screen, the same name I once cherished, the same one that had been nothing more than a reminder of the betrayal. It was hard, but I deleted the messages without hesitation. The notifications still appeared, and yet each one felt more like a ghost than a connection to the person I used to love. There was nothing left, not between us. I knew that now. The realization hit me with a sense of cold clarity. Caroline had made her choices, and I had no place in them. She was not the woman I thought I knew. She wasn't the one who had been by my side all those years. The woman I had loved was a lie, and the marriage we built was built on nothing but illusions. I took a deep breath, and, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the urge to respond. I didn't feel the need to explain myself to her, to try to fix what had already broken beyond repair. Instead, I picked up the phone again. This time, I dialed a number that had been on my mind for days. My hands were steady as I made the call, the weight of the decision finally settling in. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was professional, calm. "I need to make an appointment," I said, my voice clear, devoid of hesitation. "I'm looking to file for a divorce." There was no turning back now. Over the next few days, I went through the motions. The paperwork, the meetings with the lawyer, it all felt so surreal. A part of me wanted to freeze time, to stop this before it became real. But the other part of me knew this was the only way forward. I was done trying to save something that was already beyond repair. I was done trying to salvage a marriage that Caroline had already discarded. The next few weeks felt like a blur of paperwork and necessary steps. But there was something different. A weight was lifting off my shoulders with every phone call, every signature. The pain was still there, gnawing at me, but it didn't consume me the way it had before. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I could think clearly. And slowly, as I let go of Caroline, I began to feel something else. The stirrings of hope. I was reclaiming my life, a life that wasn't defined by her betrayal, a life that was mine again. A month had passed since Caroline walked out of the door, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe again. The weight of the past few months was still with me, like a shadow, but it was no longer consuming me. Slowly, I was reclaiming the pieces of myself I had lost. I started spending more time with my friends I had neglected for years in favor of my marriage. We went out for drinks, caught up on old memories, and laughed like we hadn't done in a long time. It felt good. It felt right. I also started focusing on myself, on what made me happy. I joined a gym, something I hadn't done in ages. I spent time with my dog, took long walks through the park, and even picked up old hobbies I had once enjoyed, but had abandoned along the way. Slowly, I was rediscovering who I was, beyond the labels of husband and provider. One evening, I decided to take a walk through the park, the cool evening air hitting my face. The sun had just set, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. I wasn't thinking about Caroline, or the mess she had left behind. I wasn't questioning if I had made the right choice. I just walked, letting the rhythm of my steps ground me in the present. Then, out of nowhere, I saw her. Caroline. She was standing by the fountain, her gaze distant as she watched the water move. She looked exactly like I remembered, beautiful, but with something different in her eyes. A softness that hadn't been there before. My heart skipped a beat, a familiar ache washing over me. But this time, it wasn't the desperate need to fix things. It was something more neutral, more final. She turned when she saw me, and for a second, we both just stood there, frozen. I wasn't sure what either of us was expecting, but it felt like a moment I couldn't let slip by. "David," she said softly, stepping toward me, I'm so sorry for everything." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at her, really looked at her. There was no anger in me anymore, no frustration, just a quiet understanding that what was broken couldn't be fixed. "I know you're sorry," I said finally, "but it doesn't matter anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel the need to comfort her. Not this time. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone who had made choices that were beyond my control. I thought maybe we could start over," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I shook my head. "I can't go back, Caroline. I can't unknow what I know. I can't unlive what I've lived." She nodded slowly, as if accepting it for the first time. "I understand." For a moment, neither of us spoke. It was as if the years we had spent together, the life we had built, had been distilled into this quiet moment. The final chapter was here, and there was no going back. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, my voice steady. "But I can't be part of it." She didn't reply, but she didn't need to. She just stood there, staring at me for a long moment, before turning away and walking in the opposite direction. I stood there, watching her go, and for the first time, I felt truly free. The past was behind me, and I was no longer bound by it. I was free to rebuild, free to find the man I used to be, and free to create a future that was my own. As I walked away, the weight of Caroline's apology faded into the distance. I was no longer torn between the hope of reconciliation and the pain of betrayal. I had embraced the unknown, and it felt like stepping into a new life, a new beginning. And this time, it was all mine. The days had turned into weeks, and the more time passed, the more I felt the weight of the past lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't immediate. There were moments when memories of Caroline would creep in, like little ghosts in the corners of my mind. But slowly, the house, once filled with the echoes of betrayal, started to feel like a place I could live in again. A place where I wasn't defined by the lies that had once consumed me. I found myself rediscovering parts of my life that I had neglected for so long. I took long walks through the neighborhood, letting the fresh air clear my mind. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't seen in years because I had been so wrapped up in my marriage. We laughed, shared stories, and reminded each other that there was more to life than the walls we'd built around ourselves. I picked up hobbies I'd abandoned, the guitar that had sat gathering dust in the corner of my room, the books that had gone unread for months. Each day felt like a small victory, a step toward rebuilding my life, not around Caroline, but around me. My career had always been a source of pride, but now it felt like an opportunity for personal growth. I focused on the aspects of my work I had neglected, projects I had pushed aside when my thoughts were consumed by our fractured relationship. Slowly, I was regaining my confidence, remembering who I was before all the chaos began. I'd begun to feel like myself again, stronger, more focused. The pain was still there, but it wasn't the suffocating weight it used to be. It was a part of me, yes, but not the whole of me. The man I had been before all of this was still there, but now he was wiser, more grounded. One evening, while walking through the park, I ran into Caroline. She was standing by a bench, her hands tucked into the sleeves of her jacket, her eyes scanning the horizon. The moment I saw her, I felt a flicker of old emotions, but it didn't hurt. It didn't consume me. When she saw me, she froze, a flash of surprise crossing her face. She hesitated, then took a few steps toward me. "David," she said softly, her voice tinged with regret. I've been thinking about you a lot. About everything. I'm sorry. For everything." I stood there, just looking at her for a moment. She looked different. We both did. It wasn't the same Caroline who had walked out of my life. It was someone new, someone who had changed, just as I had. I didn't want to hear her apologies. I didn't need them. The truth was, I had moved past it all. The woman I had loved was gone, and there was no point in dragging myself back into that pain. "I know you're sorry, Caroline," I said, my voice calm. "But that doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't change where we are now." She looked down, her shoulders slumping in defeat. "I understand," she whispered. I want you to know I'm sorry. I messed everything up." I nodded, but there was no warmth in my chest, no longing to make things right again. "It's too late for that," I said quietly. And with that, I turned and walked away. As I did, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The emotional shackles I had carried for so long were finally gone. I was free, and for the first time, I truly understood what it meant to let go. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need anything from her anymore. I was moving forward, and this time, I was in control of my own destiny. As I walked down the path, the park around me felt different, brighter. The world had opened up, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would take me.